Welcome to another edition of Ask the Expert on Contingent Workforce Strategies LinkedIn group. I can't say enough about our next guest. He is a legend in our industry. He's covered the industry for years and years and years. It's one of my close friends. I've known him from his Aberdeen days, which is going way, 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 way
Way
back.
back,
That
way back.
came to Boston and spoke at one of your conferences,
Hmm?
and we've been friends ever since, collaborating, talking, sharing ideas throughout the years. So, Chris, thank you for being on the show and talk to us a little bit more about your background and what you're doing at Arden.
Yeah, thanks so much, Jeff. That's putting it mildly that we've known each other a long time, right? I think of my close industry friends. You're top of the list, my friend, right? um,
Thank you. I
been,
appreciate it.
yeah, it's been a long time. No, really happy to be here. Thank you for asking me to join. It's an honor to be here. Um, so I started my career way back in 2006 at a company called the Aberdeen Group. It was a research firm that focused on a variety of different coverage areas. I kind of fell backwards into the procurement space because I spent some time in procurement and accounts payable. So they stuck me there, and we had this complex category space, and these are categories of spend that elicit their own strategies, sometimes their own teams, of course, their own technologies as well. And so I remember writing my very first market research study on contingent labor management, and was maybe what 9-10% of the average company's workforce back then, right? Far cry from where we are today.
Yep.
But no, I think I really fell in love with the topic from there. Sort of owned it at Aberdeen. Took over the procurement research practice in 2010, and then a few years later, 2013, joined Arden Partners as their VP of Research. And today, I serve as their SVP of Research as well as the managing director of something we call the Future of Work Exchange, which is sort of a destination site think tank for all things related to the future of work. And of course, contingent workforce is a big piece of that.
Yeah, and it's amazing, right? How you fall into it. Like we've all said as recruiters, you
Mm-hmm.
never thought you were going to get into the recruiting industry, and then this contingent workforce space,
You're here,
and then
right?
you gain a passion for it,
Mhm.
and it's so complex and interesting and always evolving that you get a bite and you're stuck in it forever, it seems, but it's
Right.
because of there's a passion for it, and it's
Mhm.
always exciting.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, that's a great analogy. You're in it for life, right?
It's a fun thing. Like we've said, a lot of our friends, you get to know people over the years. You've met them at different conferences. You talk to them, and you gain a lot of respect for each other. So no, I can't. Once again, thank you for joining me here. But I love the topic of future of work, and you've led the way
Mhm.
in talking about the future of work for many, 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 many years before it was a really cool topic to talk about, right? And
Mhm.
of course, you're leading the Future Work Exchange. Um, from the horse's mouth, who is one of the key people in coining this term, what is the future of work as a definition,
Mhm.
right? Talk to me about that and why you kind of grabbed onto that and really continued to study that and analyze that.
Yeah, I think the way we talk about the future of work today, I always say if you ask 10 different people to define it, you're going to get 10 different answers, right? Um, different research firms, different thought leaders, everyone has their own definition, right? I think it really comes down to optimizing the ways we get work done. And and again, people like you and I, we may have a little bit of a bias towards the talent or talent engagement, workforce management side of the future of work. But no, Jeff, you're right. I was using the phrase maybe 10, 11 years ago, right? And Today, I really define it as having three big components. Number one, of course, is the evolution of talent and everything that comes along with that, right? Talent acquisition, talent engagement, the extended workforce, all of the tools and strategies that we use to find, engage, and source talent today. The second piece, of course, is technology and automation, right? What are the innovative solutions that businesses are leveraging to not just find the talent they need, but better manage their workforce, better align their workforce with the ways they're getting work done and how they're truly optimizing the ways they get that work done. And then the third piece, and I really feel like this is where we've seen a lot of headway over the past few years, but it's the transformation of business leadership, right? Thinking about things like flexibility, agility, diversity, equity, and inclusion. Business leaders having more empathy and more emotion in how they lead and they manage. And I know it's there's this huge gap between, okay, we're talking about contingent labor, and now we're talking about empathy-led leadership, right? Like, how do they connect, right? But I think all of these things together really encompass the modern day workplace, the modern day workforce, and the modern day business, right? The future of work really is it boils down to the way we're working now and the way we continue to evolve in the years ahead. Sort of
Yeah,
a loaded definition, right?
it's so interesting though how you piece the
Mm-hmm.
three components together,
Yeah.
right? Because in the contingent workforce space and the extended workforce space, it's often seen as a commodity, and procurement had been running it very much so because it was such a large amount of spend
Mm-hmm.
and
Right.
seen as that as dollars and cents.
Right.
But when you bring the leadership and the empathy and the ways of leading people, and I bring that back to, and I've always said, and I've been on the soapbox, that contracting is not a lesser form of work, and contract workers and consultants are people too. It's not just a dollar sign, or it's not just spend. So patching and bringing and connecting those dots is how work gets done, and the more modern way of
Mm-hmm.
doing things. So like engagement always eats strategy for lunch. If you've got an engaged three really tight, smart people, you can beat a team of 25 any day long. Strategy always eats, engagement always eats strategy for lunch, right? So I love how you brought that all together, thinking about that in a modern way, right? So
Right.
that's cool.
Hey, Jeff, you bring up a good point, right? I mean, this phrase has been around forever, but people are pencils, right? Often used that phrase to sort of talk about this move beyond the commoditization of the contingent workforce and extended workforce management. But I think of the workforce as human, right? And I think that's one of the things, like the future of work, everyone thinks AI, blockchain, crypto, automation, technology in all of its wonderful forms. But um, a big piece that's missing oftentimes is that the future of work is based on humanity. I think it thrives on humanity.
Yeah.
If we start to think about each other in a more human-like way, we start to think about our workforce and our teams in a more human way. I mean, that's where the idea of flexibility came about, right? CEO of Google, and I always curse him because he stole it from me. He said the future of work is flexibility, and I said I've been saying that for 10 years, right? Um, which is fine. He just has a few more followers than I do, so it's understandable. But yeah, I mean that's a piece that's often missing, and I think that as we start to get away from the commoditization of talent and work, it really opens the door for business leaders to ultimately be more human, right? And you talk about engagement eating strategy for lunch. Um, I think of talent as the number one competitive differentiator of one company to the next, and if you are leading with flexibility, agility, you're being more human, and your workplace is known for that, you're going to attract the best top tier workers. And as you said, Jeff, you put it wonderfully. Contracting is not a lower form of working. Sometimes in a given field, the number one talent in that field is going to be working on a contingent or contract basis, right? And we've seen the contingent workforce grow. This could be a nice segue into our next conversation, but our research found that close to 48 or 49% of the average workforce is considered extended, contingent, non-employee, whatever phrase you want to use.
Yeah.
We're not talking about the days anymore where we're managing temps or staffing suppliers with the number one source of non-employee workers. We're talking about nearly half of the workforce, almost half, as close as you can get to half of the workforce being comprised of contingent talent, and that speaks volumes about its link to the future of work.
Yeah, no question whatsoever. And exactly, the next question I was thinking was when we talk about the future of work, it's always about trends. So I'm going to date this with a 2023 date, and I know we're going to look back at this and say Chris was right,
Yeah.
for sure, in his predictions and thoughts around hot topics and things like that. So, in 2023, what are the hot topics when it comes to future of work and the extended workforce, and even, the topic of total talent management and
Totally.
holistic, bringing the two sides of the workforce together, right?
Yeah, so let's start with them. Let's start with total talent, right? So I think a lot of folks want to remove the total talent lexicon from our industry, right? I'm not quite ready to do that yet. I mean, I've been talking about it long enough, 10, 11 years now, that even though my mindset has shifted a little bit around total talent, I think the trend now and the trend going into the future is that it's not just total talent as a program, but more total talent intelligence, right? I mean, data is going to fuel it fuels today the way we make talent-based decisions, right? So it's not as much as procurement HR collaboration, integrating a VMS with an HRIS platform. To me, it's more of what can I do to get a clearer picture of the entirety of my workforce. And when I say that, I mean the skill sets, the expertise, the portfolios, the soft skills, the hard skills, right? Total talent intelligence should be considered sort of a gateway into any other total talent strategy. If I know that I have a specific need for a specific set of skills, having total talent intel is going to allow me to make the best, most educated decision possible when it comes to talent engagement, right? I know that, all right, there's someone somewhere within one of our global locations that has that particular set of skills. Why are we not tapping into them? Why are we going out and putting a requisition open, or why are we interviewing FTEs for 6 weeks and trying to fill a role when that expertise is already here in house, right? Total talent intelligence sort of allows businesses to achieve that total talent strategy without having to move mountains, right? I mean, I think
Yeah.
that's always been the knock on total talent is you're never going to get procurement and HR in the room. And if those two units aren't talking together, there's no way in hell you're going to get procurement and TA together because there's an even bigger gap between those units. So that's one big trend. I think the second big trend is what is the impact of remote hybrid work on talent and the workforce, right? I mean, this is a horse that's been beaten to death and resurrected and beaten to death again over the past few years. But I mean, I look at the research, right? 80% of businesses in our research find that they had more remote workers and more hybrid workers in 2022 than they did in 2021. So at a time when, COVID's not a public emergency anymore. I was just at Disney 3, 4 months ago, and you wouldn't think that COVID was a thing with the amount of people squeezed into those parks. And
Yeah.
even just flying today, right? I mean, if you've been on a plane the last few months, it really feels like 2019, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's Jeff, you travel a lot. I mean, you know that. Um, but uh, but yeah, I mean, you read so much about some very big organizations, big banks and social media platforms talking about return to office plans, and it makes you think, okay, like we're gonna get back to those days of 20%, 25% of our workforce is working remotely. I think 2023 is a year of sort of resettling, right? I think that for the businesses that experience success with remote work, they're going to ease into this permanent way of doing things. Businesses that struggled, they're going to revert back to their old ways, and that's not necessarily an all bad thing. There are a lot of roles that can't be done remotely, and there are a lot of workers that just thrive in an in-person environment.
Yeah.
I know that that's not me, Jeff, probably not you either, right? We've been working remotely for a great number of years, and it's worked well for us. But no, seriously, that I think there's a great resettling happening today, where businesses are starting to get back to a non-emergency phase of their lives and their business in the business arena in general, and it's going to have a great impact on remote work. And it doesn't mean that all of a sudden you're going to shift so many workers back to the office full time, but that's going to have a huge impact on the way businesses find talent too. I mean, so many threads here that we can pull, right?